Another review on Out of Spec. This is a Honda Accord, the 2021 hybrid touring model, which is top of the line, at least as far as the hybrid line goes. And it is one of 10 trims of the Honda Accord that you can choose from this year. So do your own homework on exactly what you want in each trim, but I will try to hit as many things as possible and have some suggestions therein. We are in the 10th generation of the Honda Accord, possibly what you could consider a mid-cycle update. They had some slight improvements on the front, so let's start right away with the styling. The headlights are really nice and elegant. They are LEDs. They actually remind me a bit of the Acura Honda NSX, which is pretty cool. The fog lights are also improved, sleeker LEDs. You have a kind of large noticeable radar sensor in the front, which is great for radar cruise, but I don't know if you like looking at it, although that could theoretically be covered up by a license plate. And then you have the Honda badge, which we all recognize, though this time blue, which denotes you have a hybrid, just like Toyota does with their blue badge. You also have front sensors, which help with parking, albeit no front camera. You don't have 360 camera like you do in some cars, even on the top of the line Honda. That's a slight disappointment, but it is an affordable car for the masses. That being said, you get a lot more value than you might expect. And I think that's true with the styling. I think this looks better than the actual price tag would suggest, because you can find these as low as the mid-20s, which is really impressive. The hood is very nice and sculpted. It has this elegant curve going on the whole car, which kind of reminds me of some of the Mercedes models. And I've actually had a couple people mention that they thought I was driving a Mercedes until they saw the Honda badge. That's kind of cool. You have little bits of chrome, not too much, which is nice, but it kind of accents the top of the side windows, down kind of the bottom side skirt, the top of the door handles, the top of the grille area above the headlights as well, and in this case on these wheels. Now these wheels are 19 inches with 235 width tires. That is both good and bad for riding dynamics, more on that later, and it also is a negative effect on the fuel economy slightly. To get the optimum fuel economy, you'd want to have the 17-inch wheels, which do come on other hybrid trims. And as I said, in total, there are 10 trims on this Accord. That's a lot to choose from. The hybrid has 4, and the standard combustion engines have 6. And then around back, you have elegant LED taillights, which are symmetrical, beautiful. Really, any angle of this car looks really good in my opinion. I was blown away when I saw the 10th generation Accord back in 2018 when it first came out, and it still impresses me today. It may not have the ultra modern styling of some of the other cars coming out these past couple of years, but I'd say it's fairly timeless and still elegant. Probably one of the best designs for the money. So now looking at the back of the car, you have these very distinct crab claw taillights. Someone referred to them as crab claws, and now I cannot unsee it. They are elegant, they are LED, and they extend both from the side of the car onto the trunk itself. You of course have more hybrid badging with the blue surround of the H and the hybrid touring down at the bottom right. And then you have on the hybrids, not a fake exhaust, just a quote-unquote non-existent. The exhaust does come out the bottom below the bumper, and instead of putting it through with fake tips or something like that, they just covered it all up, which I respect. I think there are too many cars going the fake exhaust route these days. You of course have more parking sensors, a bit of that chrome on the edges that come around into the rear reflectors, and chrome down at the bottom where you would normally see the exhaust. So, the truck really is quite spacious. You have almost 17 cubic feet of space back here, which is plenty for really any road trip, even up to 4 people theoretically. And as you can see, the back seats fold down, giving you a nice full space back there. As 6 feet tall, I could actually sleep in this thing. Maybe not 2 people unless you are very close, but yeah, very impressive. You do have these buttons back here to fold the seats down, and some grocery hooks, and then below the floor you have an interesting lack of spare tire. Because of the added weight of the hybrid system, they opted for a fix-a-flat kit, which I'm not a fan of that. I would much rather see a spare tire, but what's interesting is below this giant fix-a-flat kit is the original spare tire mount location. So your first order of business after buying your hybrid Honda Accord could be buying a spare tire. That's what I would do. Especially with these 19-inch wheels that will 100% pop at some point on the Colorado potholes. But that's about all there is to see back here. Let's go take a look at the other opening, the hood. So, opening the hood to the Honda Accord. First of all, that was kind of a weird experience. The pull switch actually went to the left, which I feel like a lot go to the right. And then the hood prop goes into the middle of the hood. I have never actually seen that before. So that's interesting. But this is, again, the hybrid powertrain. So you have a 2-liter engine working in tandem with electric motors. It gets you a total of 212 horsepower, which I think is sufficient, but not enough. And we'll talk about that later in the driving. Besides this hybrid option, you also have your naturally aspirated turbocharged options. Those come in the form of inline-4, either 1.5 liter or 2 liter. If you opt for the 2 liter turbo, you get 252 horsepower, 273 foot-pound of torque. That sounds like a lot of fun to me, and I'm hoping to drive one at some point to compare it to this, because this lacks just a little bit. With the 1.5 liter turbo, you get 192 of both horsepower and torque. And that's decent, but you do get improved fuel economy over the 2 liter turbo. So it's nice that you have the options to kind of balance your fuel economy versus your fun factor, which can't always go hand in hand. Some interesting things under this hood are the Earth Dreams Technology label on top of the motor for the hybrid system. That's pretty interesting. I've never heard of that company in my life. I also love the green kind of nuts that are on top of the suspension top hats. That's a very interesting feature for this car. The suspension is adaptive, which is cool, so that could be a way they determine that. But yeah, other than that, it's just your kind of run-of-the-mill hybrid engine bay. Welcome to the interior of the Honda Accord. First of all, let's talk about materials and design. Overall, better than I expected for an Accord. I guess I wasn't sure what to expect with this car, but I've just never given the Accord much thought. But now I will. The materials are actually quite nice. There's a lot of leather, which you get kind of in the mid trims and up. The steering wheel is a really nice feel. It's not too big, not too small, not too thin. It just feels really solid. And then you have what I think is the most realistic fake wood I've ever seen. All across the mid-height, kind of on the door and then the dashboard, you have this interesting dark wood. At least in this case it's dark. I don't know what the other trims and colors have. It looks so real and textured, but when you touch it, there is no texture. It's just almost that flat, glossy feel and finish. Really where your touch points would be are soft enough that you'd be okay. And the plastic in the center console actually looks fairly premium. And you have knobs, which is a warm welcome to any car in my opinion. Too many cars have the push button only capacitive type screens and I can't stand it. This is the perfect amount of knobs. 5, that's right. One for volume, one for tune if you listen to the radio, and one for each of the dual climate zones and one for the fan. That's fantastic. They feel good, they operate just fine, they do the job. They do feel a little flimsy, so they might break at some point, but I'd still take that over the capacitive button. So basically, it looks quite good and it feels almost as good. The seats are fairly comfortable, not the best, honestly, but they do come in both heated and ventilated in this touring trim. That only comes with the touring trim if you want the ventilation. If you want just heated, you can go with the EXL, and that'll get you heated fronts and rear seats, which is a nice welcome addition to an entry-level mid-size sedan. You have defrosters for the front and rear glass as well as the mirrors, and it's just a very nicely laid out interior. Everything is kind of where I would expect it to be, and that's not always the case. It's not overwhelming. There are a lot of buttons, but they don't really surprise you or catch you off guard. You do have automatic lights, you have automatic wipers. This even has a heads-up display. The technology and connective services have actually really impressed me, especially for this price point. Even the somewhat lower EX trim gives you wireless CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, and a wireless Qi phone charger down here in the middle. But even the base model hybrid gives you the CarPlay features, the dual zone climate control, the heated seats. But even the base hybrid trim gives you remote start
dual zone climate control, and that fantastic fuel economy with the 17-inch wheels. At about $26,500, that is probably one of the best bargains of the bunch. Though I would personally spring for the EX trim just because wireless CarPlay is amazing. I've never used it before, and I'm already sold. The infotainment is fine. It's very functional and very fast and responsive. One of the best I've seen in any car lately. So many of them are just bogged down with so many details that it actually slows down the infotainment, or they focus on, cool animations. This one is just functional. And I guess function should be more important than looks. Maybe. I just wish it looked a little different or had a little bit more customization. The driver's gauge cluster is entirely digital, except there is a needle on the right side. But what's funny is when you start the car, the needle on the right and a fake needle on the left both do the revving motion, which is really an interesting touch when you start the car. You also have options for Wi-Fi connectivity, the heads-up display, and the Honda Link app allows you to start your car remotely, lock and unlock it, and do a few other things like monitor your driving and your efficiency from previous drives. You don't have a drive selector, which is slightly strange to me. I think I prefer one, but you do have nice, convenient push buttons that are, I guess, easy to use once you remember which one does what. They're of course labeled, but it's interesting. They're not all push. Park and neutral are push. Reverse is kind of this pull back button, and drive is a big accentuated button. And then before that you have your drive modes like economy, sport, or even EV, which is mostly useless, but more on that in the driving. And then you have a brake hold button, which is one of my favorite features in many of the modern cars, mostly in hybrids. With the higher trims you also get a premium 10-speaker sound system. Premium in quotes because I am not a big fan. It sounds fine, but I'm really not looking for excuses to listen to my music like I do in some other cars. And in fact, I got fatigued enough from listening to it too much that I just switched to podcast. There is an interesting DTS neural effect you can turn off and on, and I can't quite figure out what it does. I mean, DTS stands for kind of this digital theater sound, which is supposed to be more virtually surrounding, but it's, I don't know, I wish you could dial in between off and on. It's just off or on, and I don't really like either. With the higher trims as well, you also have the sunroof, which does not go full length, but it is above the driver and passenger, and it's easy to operate from up here. And then you have your auto-dimming mirror, which works fine, looks fine. That's about it for the front. Let's take a look at the back seats and some nice surprises. The back seats are incredibly impressive. For me personally, I think they're almost more comfortable than the front. And in this case, they are heated, which is really nice. Plus you have your climate control down there. You can't control it from back here, but it is nice to have vents. You wouldn't believe how many cars don't have the vents in the back. Then you also have USB ports, one for each side, and the center bit folds down. It's actually one of the nicer center armrests in a back seat that I've seen. But of course, everyone's biggest question is, how's the space? Well, this is probably the most spacious mid-size sedan I've ever had in the back row. I am sitting behind myself as usual, and I am 6 feet exactly, and I have inches of knee room. And by the way, the front seat was plenty spacious. And then my headroom is not quite as much. I still have a bit to spare, but even with my hat on, it's about an inch left, which is why the moonroof couldn't go all the way back. That may be because it stops right here to give you more headroom. Not sure on that. But overall, very spacious. It's wide, it's comfortable. I'm a huge fan. I would gladly take a road trip back here. We are off driving the 2021 Honda Accord Hybrid. Just like the exterior and the feel of the interior, the ride actually impressed me more than I expected. It's actually very quiet in here. I could probably hear myself whisper. I am on kind of a dirt hybrid gravel cement road, so keep that in mind. How would I describe the power in this hybrid Honda Accord? Let's say perfectly fine. It is not quick. I imagine the 2-liter turbo with the extra boost in horsepower and torque would be more engaging and more fun and just overall quicker. But this has impressed me. The 0 to 60 time is quoted to be about 7 seconds.
and I've heard it's a bit quicker. It's hard to gauge up here at altitude with internal combustion engine or even hybrid cars. It's felt plenty quick in town, and even getting onto the highway at kind of an upward slope, I felt fine. The interesting thing is the power curve. If you really like slam on the accelerator, there we go. It's like almost like 2 seconds of turbo lag, except there's no turbo. It's 2 seconds of electric assistance lag, which is very interesting. But once it hits, I mean, you know it's there. It's almost like if this was modern VTEC, that kind of feeling. But when you slam on it, the power suddenly revs up, and then the CVT optimizes maximum torque for as long as possible. So it's really funny to do a 0 to 60 pull in this car, because it just revs all the way and stays at that max rev the whole time it's accelerating, which sounds very off compared to most cars with automatic transmissions that would, you know, work through the gears, and you probably, you know, second, maybe third gear gets to 60 miles an hour. This one just sounds like one gear maxed out and then continues to slowly ride in the acceleration. The steering feels direct. It probably is electric power steering. It is electric power steering, but it's one of the more direct feeling electric ones I've felt. And the tires just really help you go exactly where you want to go. Now, the flip side, of course, is the comfort. The 19-inch wheels with the slim rubber is not as comfortable to ride on. Every pothole is a nightmare, and I would definitely be afraid of them kind of popping somewhere out here in Colorado, where it's full of potholes because of the winter wear and tear on our roads. So even in sport mode, which I will engage now, there we go, turn my gauge cluster with red accents. You just kind of hear it revving all the way up. And with sport mode, the lag is kind of shortened a bit, but it's still definitely there. So I'll turn that back off. But it's just really, I don't know, it's just interesting to drive. Not really intriguing, just I'm kind of always wondering what it's going to do at any given moment. Now, if you don't care about getting somewhere as fast as possible, which I don't think you should if you're buying this car, if you drive it gingerly, you will find excellent fuel economy. Really, any of the engines offer decent fuel economy for a mid-size sedan, and it's just fine. It's almost more fun to drive if you're not in a hurry. But when you chuck it into sport mode, the adaptive dampers do respond. Just getting around corners feels nice. I take it up to the canyons, and it just feels planted. It's like I know exactly where I'm going, and the adaptive dampers just keep it stiff when you need it to be, and relatively nicer ride when you don't. Something very interesting are these paddles. They don't actually shift. They're not paddle shifters. They're paddle regenerative braking adjusters. So basically, when you're driving and then you take your foot off the accelerator, your car will kind of coast like normal, maybe a little bit of regen in there. But if you do the plus or minus paddle, it actually affects how much speed you have after your foot is off the accelerator. The really annoying thing to me is in normal mode, every time you make an adjustment with the paddles and then stop accelerating, it cancels out. You have to redo it. So basically, if you care about this and you're driving around town, you'll be redoing it all the time. I don't understand why it's that way. But in sport mode, if you make the adjustment with the paddles, and you accelerate and then let off, it will stay. I don't understand why that is. I don't know if it's a software glitch. I don't understand. But there are 4 settings of this regenerative cruising. The lowest one will slow you down significantly, kind of like the regen on an electric car if it was somewhat medium or light. Definitely not as hard as the electric cars. And then the most minimal regen, which I guess is plus all the way. Still trying to figure out how they label these paddles. It will actually feel like cruising like a normal car, just pulling your foot off the accelerator and just let it go. The steering wheel has a lot of buttons, but they give you a lot of convenient functionality. On the left side, it's more audio focused with volume rocker and forward and reverse track rocker. Although there's a scroll wheel between the forward and reverse track. That doesn't do volume or anything. That does the screen in front of you. It'll adjust the source if you're on volume, or if you go home with the home button, it'll let you adjust other things like power flow, eco drive, power charge, range and fuel, speed and time. It's just whatever is displayed within that leftmost gauge cluster. As far as these driver assist features, they work pretty well. The radar cruise works nicely. The lane keep assist is functional, but the lane departure warning is not always accurate. Sometimes it detects the lane, sometimes I think there's a very obvious lane that it does not detect. So I wouldn't rely on the lane departure warning as much, but for the driver assist features like the cruise control, it works quite well, and it's nice to see it on a Honda Accord. So I had some minor grievances, but overall I am very impressed. I've driven every Accord since the 90s, and I would have never expected to see this style, this interior quality, and this driving capability on an Accord. They have sold tons of these, over 18 million over the past 45 years of its run, and I expect they will sell many, many more. They've always been an affordable, reliable car for the masses, and I've never really looked twice in an Accord until this 10th generation. I think it looks excellent, more so than its price point, and being at between the mid-20s and mid-30s as far as value, I think it's really good. It's enjoyable around town, but fun and engaging when you want it to be, like in the mountains, especially with the sporty suspension and these sporty tires. I would probably opt for the 2-liter turbo myself, again because of the power and the 10-speed automatic. I think that just sounds like a more fun and engaging drivetrain, but you can't argue with the efficiency of this hybrid. Let us know what you guys think. How does it compare to the Accord that was inevitably in your life at some point, whether you owned one or your friends or their parents? Seems like everyone had an Accord at some point. I think it's improved a lot over the years, and this is something I would gladly take on a road trip or in the mountains, which I'm about to do. All right, have a great day, and we'll see you very soon in the next video.